Hey everyone, welcome to the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore, presented by Arai Helmets. You know, for 3 generations, Arai's been making some of the world's best helmets, and of course, Arai Helmets meets all safety standards, but they also pride themselves in a blend of engineering tech and human craftsmanship that makes an Arai fit better and feel better, which also protects you better. Your head is worth the best, so visit AraiAmericas.com for more information on tech, fit, finish, paint jobs, all that stuff. AraiAmericas.com, because you owe it to you. Well, with that, hi, Jason.
What's up, G-Dub? How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. Just, I know you're on the road for once. You're actually in a hotel room doing this, and
I am, yeah.
I get to be chilling out. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's that time of year where I know you're slammed and I am as well. But yeah, we got home a couple days ago, I guess, from Sonoma, and man, there was a lot of good racing this weekend.
Yeah. Do you want to address any rumors, though, about you that you need to talk about? Anything that you want to fill us in on? Anything of that sort?
Nope.
You sure?
Yeah, I got no rumors. There's no rumors.
Well,
no,
I'm good. There's a rumor you broke your wrist. How's that rumor?
Yeah, it's a bad rumor. I didn't. So that's good. At least I didn't break my wrist. That's a good thing, right?
Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, Pridmore's falling apart. I mean, falling apart. So,
man, like everybody doesn't know. It's embarrassing at this stage, though, you know? Like, you sit there and you think, what else can happen? I don't know if any of our listeners have ever had one of those years where it seems like everything you do is bad when it pertains to your body, but that's me this year. I've managed to, have obviously an incident in Phillip Island, and I'm kicking doors that I don't mean to kick in hotel rooms. And then basically what ended up happening is there was a step stool that I stepped down onto at Sonoma, and it went out from underneath my feet as quickly as I put my foot there. I didn't even see it coming, and I went straight upside down at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So I was, you know who I blame? I blame Matthew Skoltz. That's who I blame, Greg.
Is that really? And how did he tie into your incident?
I blame him because I saw the poor guy fling himself, and I was actually out watching warm up on Sunday morning, and I saw it happen. And so I raced over to where he was because it was kind of in a weird spot. And I picked him up, poor guy, and he was pretty dejected. Obviously, that was the second one of the weekend for him and the team. And, you know, you could see how much he cared about his team, because I don't think it would have mattered if Matthew had 2 broken legs. He still felt so awful for the team because of what had happened in morning warm-up. And so I'm kind of talking to him, and just as we drive back to the pits. But had he not crashed, I wouldn't have gone back to the pits, you see. I would have been out watching warm-ups, all of them. But I drove him back, parked him, and then I walked inside a team hauler. It wasn't the Westby team hauler, so I'm not going to try to get on anybody, but it wasn't theirs.
It's kind of
but see, I wouldn't have gone back to the pits. I wouldn't have gone back to the pits if it wasn't for Matthew. So Matthew owes me a wrist.
Well, he doesn't owe you a wrist because it's just some soft tissue damage, like I'm sure there is to your head. Okay.
Yeah, I hope that's all it is. Honestly, when I did it, I thought I broke it. So I actually went to medical. I can't make it up, right? Went to medical.
Yeah.
And of course, there's racers in there, which makes it even better for me because I just took Matthew Skoltz, who flung himself at probably 100 plus, and took him back to the paddock, and then I can't walk out of a trailer. Yeah, it was bad, and I really did. So I have so much planned over the next 2 months. You know, like I'm getting my leg fixed in November, and I've had so much planned on in between now and then. I got so many one-on-ones and things like that are going on. I got some really cool golf trips that I want to squeeze in that are kind of in there. And now all that's a little bit in jeopardy for me with my wrist. It's not broken, but like you said, Greg, it might be some soft tissue. So,
which can be worse in the long run, like in terms of recovery time and that type of stuff. But all right, let's just move off of that, Jay, because please take care of yourself.
Thank you. Don't shoot yourself with an arrow this week. I mean, you know, it could be, you are my friend. Something weird could happen. You never know.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
After your warm up this morning, it sounds like maybe that would have been a better option. So
yeah, that was not. I was struggling this morning, no doubt. For me, I'm in Dublin, Ohio at the moment, just north of Columbus, for a national archery tournament. The only real national that I want to shoot. There's a series, but this is the only one I can make all year. Although 2 weeks from now, Jason, I'll be back here flying to Columbus to shoot the USA Archery Field National Championship, which is a different type. It's more like golf in 28 or 24 different targets and blah, blah, blah. You will kind of walk through the woods. That's up near Mid-Ohio. So I'm definitely going to stop by Mid-Ohio.
That'd be great.
You know, look at the gate and take a selfie and post it up on Instagram or something goofy like that.
Go ask them when they're repaving that place and making some changes so we could take MotoAmerica to Mid-Ohio. I know I always get that from fans. Probably more than any track that we go to. I get people saying, I wish you guys would come back to Mid-Ohio. But there's just some things there that they need to fix.
Yeah, the inherent issue, from what I understand, Jason, is at Mid-Ohio, just so people understand, is when you get to the backside of the track, that Thunder Valley or whatever it is, that right-hander kind of takes you down a hill. That's the property line. And there's no place to expand.
No place they can do anything, is there?
Yeah, and that's been a huge issue because of the runoff area as superbikes have gotten quicker and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It'd be great. I would love to come back to Mid-Ohio, but that's why we have Pit Race, because it kind of services a similar...
It's right there.
Yeah, demographic area, geographic area as well. So, but anyway, speaking about serving and racing, MotoGP happened at Red Bull Ring. So let's start with that, because that MotoGP race was everything we hoped it would be. Now, we understand Ducati has won, I don't even know what, the last 4 in a row or
4 in a row now.
4 in a row.
Yeah.
So a lot of people thought, it's a Ducati track. But then the way Marc Marquez has been racing lately, a lot of people thought maybe Marquez is going to go and dominate. And he had really shown a lot of speed at the Red Bull Ring. And it ended up being Dovizioso wins, Marquez in second, the margin of victory 0.2 of a second. Quartararo, his very first podium. Congratulations to Fabio. In third place, Valentino Rossi in fourth. That's 7.7 seconds back. He was ahead of Vinales, Rins, Bagnaia, Miguel Oliveira, eighth place. His best
Tremendous
result.
effort. Yeah,
absolutely. Petrucci back there in ninth. Morbidelli in 10th. Nakagami 11th. Zarco, we're going to talk about him later in the show. Brodel, Espargaro, Carol Abraham in 15th place, our last points-paying position. Some notables. Hafid Cyrene got hurt. Pol Espargaro out. Cal Crutchlow out. Jack Miller out. So, do you want to talk about the last lap of this race, or last really 2 laps, I think, and how incredible it was?
There's so many talking points about this weekend, Greg, that, I think just talking about the race in general between Dovi and Marquez and how they kind of broke away, and Marquez just followed Dovi till about 3 laps from the end, and that's when the fireworks started going off. They were passing and repassing, and I'll be the first to admit too that I'm a bit critical of Dovi a bit. I feel like he's so hit or miss, and I'm always talking about how they're talking about this rivalry between him and Marquez, and they were still trying to pump that up, and I just still don't see the rivalry. What I see is it seems like Dovi has certain tracks that they go to where you just kind of go, okay. And, the Ducati the last 4 years has been pretty dominant at this track. If you remember, Greg, it won initially with Iannone. It was Iannone that won, and then Dovi went and won, and then Lorenzo won last year, and then Dovi comes back and wins this year. It was almost like a feel of he has to win. And I think there's some things that we can talk about as the podcast goes. But for as critical as I've ever been of the guy, he absolutely was amazing on this weekend. I think that what he did at the finish, to do what he did to Marquez, just mug him basically on the last corner of the last lap. That has got to be such a huge relief on his shoulders for a number of reasons, I feel. And he rode so well that he truly, truly deserved that. Interesting note.
I saw that a statistic that said that in that situation when Marquez and Dovi are actually racing each other, it's only been 6 times, and 5 times Dovi's beat him.
Yeah, no, it's a staggering.
I was surprised about that stat. I thought it was more evenly balanced, but for those that didn't get to see the race, it was a last corner, last lap pass. Marquez was leading after multiple passes leading up to it in the last 2 laps, and it's a right-hander, real tight right-hander, and Marquez left a bike width, right?
If that, yeah.
If that.
He was tipping it in, he was tipped in, backed in, and Dovi still went underneath him.
And the interesting thing is if you watch it, Marquez had to finish the corner at dip to a real quick lean angle. But what he said after the race, Jason, was that there was actual contact on the brake lever guard. So that little piece that comes off the bar and then tries to cover it so you don't get front impacts, got caught somewhere on Dovizioso's bike, and it broke free at the last moment, and that allowed like Marquez to just kind of dip and make the corner. But so that was a bit of a tense moment, and I watched that replay over and over and over, trying to see if there was contact or where the contact would be, because the first thing that comes into my mind is it was the aero package. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, was it the aero package that ended up because that was that close? But it looked like the contact was made kind of after, more mid part of the bike, maybe even back of the bike when it made contact.
Yep.
But I just thought it was such a brilliant move. I thought it was so like that was the one pass. If you say all year long, what's been the most decisive pass we have had? Like Dovizioso just went, I'm going. Like there was no hesitation. There was nothing. It was just like a dart, just right there, stuck it in, turned it and gassed it. And I was like, woof. But Marquez also
it's the most memorable.
Yeah.
It's the most memorable, right? Because I think that when you say what you say, I couldn't agree with you more. Like that was definitely the race of the year so far, especially for the front placings. But Marquez kind of does it every weekend where he goes up underneath people. So it's not really a shocker to any of us. But with Dovi doing it, I think, in the last corner, last lap, just the way it was, the build up to it. The other thing, and you just started to briefly touch on it. I don't know if you noticed it, but I kind of feel like we saw a little part of Marc Marquez that I hear so many people not like about him that, I think when you talk about Marquez, there's still so many people that bring back the Rossi Marquez incident at Sepang so many years ago, and that Marquez really isn't the nice guy that everybody thinks or he tries to portray. That said, in the winner's interview or the in Parc Fermé right after the race, he kind of went the tire route, but you could almost tell that he was actually really, I want to say, pissed off that he lost that race, even though he tried to put a positive spin on it and he still got the championship points lead. And they talked about the tire. He said he knew on the warm-up lap. And that stuff to me is, I don't want to say it's excuses because I'd never really accuse somebody with his credentials of having excuses, but it's a deflection, isn't it? Of this is kind of why we ended up where we ended up, instead of, I knew on the warm-up lap that we kind of maybe had the wrong tire choice. And I think he wanted to win there. I think he wanted to win so bad because Ducati's dominated there so much.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And they actually, MotoGP posted the onboard shot of Marquez, which was the rear face or the camera that was on the front of the bike, but faces back towards him.
The rider.
Yeah. So he comes through the corner after Dovi passed him. And as soon as they cross start finish line, Marquez just like dips his head real quick, like, shit. You know what I mean? Like you could tell the emotion because he really wanted to win that. He was bumming. And the thing that was interesting though, is the way that Marquez talked about it post race. He was like, well, it was the wrong tire choice. But the good news is we chose the wrong tire, but we were still competitive for the win. And I think that's kind of like, I don't think that's much of an excuse as it is like an excuse wrapped up in a dig, which is like, hey, man, if I had chosen the right tire, this wouldn't be a race. That was kind of like the read-through on that one. And I thought, okay, here we go. Like, I like that because now we're playing head games. We're playing head games with the press. Now, what is interesting is that after they do all that stuff, they go in, they sit down, they do a press conference, or they put them in an area where they can actually have a conversation. And so one of the commentators for the MotoGP race that you hear on the world feed that most people in the States hear, they actually had the pass or the last lap, I guess, on a cell phone, and they were asking the two of them to go through the progression, and it was entertaining, but man, it was uncomfortable because here you have, Dovi, who's just like, over the moon, excited, trying not to trash Marquez. You have Marquez really trying not to make excuses, and trying to be smiley and, on the spot. But you could tell underneath it all, the dude just aggravated. You know what I mean? Like kind of like when you see in MotoAmerica, PJ Jacobsen finishing third or second. It's like, hey, I'm on the podium. I don't really care. Like all I want to do is win.
Yep.
And so it was kind of interesting to see that. And I thought, okay,
yep.
Well, they didn't say no. They did it. They did that little interview thing with the video going corner to corner, but I don't know. Yeah. It's a good race, Jason.
Yep.
It's a good race. End of story. Like
great
a race.
It could have happened with either
what's
person.
5 points in the? Yeah, but 5 points in the championship, like as a championship race, it makes nothing. Difference.
Yeah, and you got to think that if it had happened the other way around, it would have just been another Marquez is the greatest thing. He's the greatest. He's the GOAT. It wouldn't even probably been that big a deal. Yeah, it would have still been a great race, but I think the fact that Dovi beat him, and did it superbly is amazing. Let's go back to the Yamahas too. I mean, we look at Yamahas finishing third, fourth, fifth. I was in a discussion about this just yesterday, and we were talking about kind of the best bikes. And I still feel in my own mind, when I watch these races, I still feel that the Ducati is the best bike out there. And I bring that up because it seems to me that most of the time the Ducatis have 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are capable of kind of getting up there with Miller and Petrucci. Obviously, we know that Petrucci finished 17 seconds back, so it doesn't really apply to this weekend. Bagnaia was the next best Ducati in 7th, a rookie. But the Yamahas, did you see how fast the Honda and the Ducati went by Quartararo?
I did. I mean, yarded him.
Embarrassing.
It was
embarrassing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They missed it.
And the fact,
Yamaha missed the engine development this year, 100%.
Big time. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even close. And it's when I base what I base off of, just in my opinion, on the best bike out there, Honda has definitely been the one that's closed that gap the most, purely because of the top speed. Now, you hear Crutchlow talking about how hard the Honda is to ride and things. There's one guy that's really been able to do it. Obviously, Lorenzo's nowhere to be seen on that bike. Even when you look at Brattle, I mean, Brattle's 31 seconds back on Lorenzo's bike. So you sit there and you think, you look at the Suzuki. I think the Suzuki is a great package. I think it's really good. And I'd almost say that it's of par right now with the Yamaha. Is the Suzuki. But I think you look at it and it's kind of like, I don't even know how good the Honda really is compared to the other two. I know it's faster, but it's not like there's anybody else even getting in the zip code on another Honda. Crutchlow does it occasionally, where he gets up there. Obviously, he's been on the podium this year. But I feel like that gap is closed so hard on the Ducatis by what Marquez has done on his bike that it was such an important win for them. But the Yamaha is just, I mean, Quartararo rode amazing to finish 6.1 back. Rossi finishes 4th, only a tick behind Quartararo at the end. And it looked like Vinales and Rins were both going to catch Rossi, and Rossi was able to hold out that second. But the Yamahas right now, there's just going to be certain tracks that they're just going to struggle. And this looked like one of them. Even though they didn't finish that far back, you could tell they just didn't have the pace down the straights. You
think that because of the state of the Yamaha, that this is the worst case scenario for a guy like Valentino in his position? You know, the people have said he's the GOAT. He's far and away the most popular MotoGP racer out there, but he's getting up there in age, and this isn't really showcasing the speed that he has at the moment. Like, don't you feel it's kind of like desperate times in a way for a guy like Valentino? It's like you need to give him the best package so he can showcase his talent at this point, because when is it going to start to dwindle if it hasn't yet? You know what I mean?
I think that you can look at it in a couple different ways, because I flip-flop with Valley, because at the beginning of the year I said there's no way the guy wins a Grand Prix, and then he runs third at Doha, and he runs second at Coda, and then I kind of flip-flopped on it, thought, oh yeah, maybe he will win. I really believe that he's trying his best. And when you look at the way they finished this weekend, you got Quartararo, who's the young rookie guy that comes in on his bike, on his Petronas Yamaha. What does he set? 2 or 3 pole positions, and he's had a couple podiums now, and this and that, Greg, where it's like, then you got Vinales, who's kind of the middle of the two of those, of the three of them. He finishes behind Rossi. He's kind of like, you don't want to get rid of him because he shows incredible pace. Obviously, he tests well. And then you got Rossi, who's the older guy, and he finishes between the two of them. I just think that the Yamaha package is what it is. I think that all three of them rode it as best they could, and that's just where they're going to finish right now. Now we're hearing a little bit more even about the Suzuki using up its tires more so than it had in the past, and it finishes basically right on the back of those 3 Yamahas. I just feel, I definitely feel like if you give Rossi a little bit of what he needs, that he can be up front. I just don't know if he's got enough. I don't know if he could beat Marquez on a straight up head to head anymore. I just don't know if that can happen. Yeah. I mean, he got close last year at Sepang and then fell over and whatever. But anyway, yeah, just it's an interesting. The whole race had stories all the way through it. I think the fact that,
so let's talk about Miguel Oliveira.
Bagnaia. Yeah, talk about Oliveira for sure. Yeah. I mean, Oliveira on the KTM, when you see what that team has gone through, it was a shame to see Paul Espargaro's bike break. I mean, obviously Austria is the KTM factory's home race. It was too bad to see that bike stall. But Oliveira picked it right up, only 16.2 back, Greg. I thought that was a really good run from him.
I agree. Yeah. And the home race, and obviously the circuit's named after them, and that's coming off of a Moto2 victory that they had with Binder. We'll talk about that in a second, but I think Miguel Oliveira is starting to impress, and we're going to talk more about him later because of a news item that came out. But we'll talk about that after we get through the classes. But so why don't we talk more about Miguel Oliveira and that stuff? But again, Jay, moving forward in this championship, I think you have just a one-off great race, 0.2 of a second, a stuffed move. You have the mighty Marquez sitting on top of the perch. He gets dethroned for a couple of weeks, I guess you could say. But in the end, he's just managing this championship the way he needs to. And what does he care? I mean,
I don't even think he thinks about it, though. I don't even think he thinks about the championship. I mean, it's such a big lead. Most of the pundits that are around, like all of us, I couldn't even tell you how big the lead is. I just think, oh yeah, Marquez has got a big lead. I don't even think about it because it's not really a talking point. He's just out there. I think absolute worst case scenario for Marquez on his bad days, he finished where he finished this weekend. I don't see him finishing any further back than second. No. There's not going to be 3, 4, 5 guys at the end of a MotoGP race that are capable of beating him. So the championship, he's so comfortable because he's got such a huge lead that it really doesn't matter. So I think that when they head off to Silverstone, he just goes to the races every weekend, just trying to win them. And you're going to get something like what happened this weekend to Dovey. Now we're going to see if Dovey goes on a good run. And after we get done talking about the results of each one of these races, there's some really good talking points that I think that you and I have in the rundown here that'll be interesting, because I think that there's a lot of things that have been going on in MotoGP this weekend coming off their break. They went to Brno and then they went to A1 Ring, but there's been some things going on. So we'll talk some more about that. But next for these guys is going to be Silverstone here in a couple of weeks. Greg, I don't know if you got the chance. Did you get to watch the Moto2 race?
Oh, I certainly did.
Unreal. So Brad Binder wins. He wins the race by
on a Red Bull
0.3 of a second
on
a Red Bull KTM at the home race. And it kind of seems like that there's some news even about the Red Bull team in Moto2. Next year, they will not be in Moto2. Mm-hmm. So Brad Binder goes and wins the home race there by 0.3 over Alex Marquez, who just continues now to just show. He's almost kind of showing what his brother has a little bit. We're starting to see some of that develop. Jorge Navarro ends up third, only 1.8 back behind the winner. Then you had Baldassarri, Augusto Fernandez, who's a former winner as well. He ends up fifth. Luthi ends up sixth. Martin Iker is eighth. Marcel Schroeder and Passini rounded out the top 10. There were some crazy crashes in this race.
Oh my God.
Greg, but Luca Marini took out Enea Bastianini so big, because this to me was the best Moto2 race of the year.
Agreed.
It had a lot of different guys up there, including Remy Gardner, including Tetsuda Nagashima. Xavi Vierge took out Nagashima.
Which was a shame, because I think Nagashima
was a big shame.
Yeah, I think Nagashima was going to win that race. Yeah, he looked so good to win that race.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely would have been there. Vierge takes him out so violently in turn 5 there, going down the hill, I believe it was. And then Remy Gardner, again, Remy Gardner, is right there, riding so well. He's there. But there's that franticness again that's just too insane to me, that like it looked like, he was trying to blame Marquez. I didn't get to see any of the post-race stuff about, if he blamed anybody, if he did. But there's a racecraft that you have to have, and there's so much time left in that race, and he's up in the front, and he's drafting, and he's redrafting, and he's there. And he kind of just moves over to the right after he comes out of turn 1, after he's ran a bit wide, and Marquez on the way through, like, they kind of brush and touch, and Remy Gardner gets the bars ripped out of his hands and crashes and freaks out. And it's like, I don't know, Greg. How did you look at that yourself?
Same way.
Okay.
The franticness, the hectic. It's just like he just won't
chill out.
Let a race
just chill.
Develop. He's got to force the issue all the time. And I don't want to talk bad about the kid, but it's
no.
There's got to be some type of switch eventually.
It's a learning thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the maturation is going to come in and just say, okay, just let me take this position for the moment. Let me just, you know what I mean? Like, why force it? And it was, the problem with that crash was it was so effing scary, Jay, because he ends up on the track and, you know, people are coming out and just ripping, and he kind of stood right, not in the middle, but he was like off to the side in the line, like having to protest.
It's like he wasn't in a hurry to get off the track.
Yeah, the first bike goes by right in front of him, and he's still like, my gosh, he's got to throw his hands in the air and be all angry about someone who's way down the road, right? Who's not even paying attention,
can't control it.
And when the second bike came by, I was like, and even, you know, it was like, dude, get off the track, please. You know?
Yeah, don't get run over. Don't make a bad situation even worse. Oh, and that to me is, it's yeah.
Anyways, hold on. Crazy crashes, I get all that, Jay. But yeah, the thing for me that impressed the most was Alex Marquez, who had a crappy qualifying position, did not get some ridiculous, you know, good start. And he was back in seventh, 8th, and he just hung out. He hung out, made a pass, hung out, made a pass. And then all of a sudden, all these people started falling around him, and Marquez kept his nose clean, and then blammo, bunch of championship points for him. Second place finish, 20 points. If he wins this championship, you've got to look back on race 11, you know, this Red Bull Ring, and you've got to say that for a dude who kept his nose clean, that this race, he could have got caught up in all kinds of crazy stuff and scored 0 points. And I just think if he wins this championship under 20 points, you know, if he wins it by 10 points, by whatever, that this is going to be one of those defining races. There's 19 races in the series, so we still have 8 to go, and most people are going to forget this one. But for me, I just thought that right there is a championship run for Alex Marquez, and I was really impressed with the way he handled all the stuff around him. And it was really down to him and Binder, because they finished 1.8 ahead of Navarro. By the way, Baldassari 4th, and Fernandez and Thomas Luthi 6th. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
It's like,
But when you look at it, Marquez qualified 11th. Mm-hmm. This is a win for him.
Yeah.
Finishing second. This is a win from him. And so many times in the past, we've seen him be the guy that runs up front and crashes and gives people podiums and gives people points and this and that. And that's not happening anymore. And I agree with you. There's 2 races that really come to mind for me when you talk about Alex Marquez this year. The wins and stuff are all there. But this second place to me was a huge points gain, especially because he beat the guys he had to beat, meaning Baldassari and most importantly, Luthi. He's beating the guys he needs to beat for the championship. But he's not overriding his equipment. If the win is there and he can take advantage of it, he will. But at the end of the day, that second place to me is like a win. He watched Marini completely clean out Bastianini, who I felt awful for, because Bastianini's come from Moto3, and he has really shown the consistency of a young guy who's going to be he will be a force to be reckoned with next year in Moto2. Will Enea Bastianini. But what Marquez has done, the 2 races that really come to mind for me, is when he gets taken out by Baldassari in Assen after he had won 2 races in a row or 3 races in a row. He was on his way to the front at Assen. Baldassari cleans him out. And I remember thinking, well, it's going to be interesting to see how he bounced back from that. And he comes back and wins. Then he comes to A1 Ring and ends up second. And he's just piling points on now. And this is a lot of like the things that you've seen his brother do in the past. And I don't think it's a question of, you know, if he wins the championship. I believe he is. Injury and horrendously bad luck aside, I don't see anybody that's his equal right now. So tremendous Moto2 race. I love watching it, and I can hardly wait till they get to Silverstone.
And that rumor that I talked about, the possibility of Alex Marquez and his brother being teammates on Repsol, obviously that went away with, you know, enough confirmation that Lorenzo's going to be back next year on the Repsol team, you know, hoping he's going to be back in Silverstone. But hey, it was a nice pipe dream. So,
well, I think that, but Greg, I think that, you know, I wonder how far off you were with some of that stuff, you know, because you and I, we're always kind of playing devil's advocate with seeing how things kind of work themselves out and stuff. And I think, you know, when we get done talking about these results, there's a few things that I think that are very, very interesting in MotoGP right now. But I think that there's a couple of reasons why this guy didn't go to Petronas Yamaha, and obviously the relationship that his brother has with Honda and all that stuff. But I mean, he signs a 1-year deal with the same team he was on last year, and I think there'll be a spot open at Honda next year. So I don't think that it was that far fetched of an idea.
No, there's still
I think,
two grid spots. There's only 22, right? There's still 2 grid spots available to be filled because there's a 24 max grid spot availability. So anything could happen in terms of a team coming, factory equipment. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be had there for sure.
There's some stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
but for me, like you're saying, Jason, I think that if you look at the Moto2 class,
yep,
it got pilfered so badly in terms of talent that moved up last year that for me, the only person, I mean, Binder's going, but Alex Marquez has got to be the premier rider to have the possibility to advance. Did you get to see the Moto3 race at all?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Loved it. It was great. Yeah. And I mean, especially the fact that it was a little bit wet and dry and a little bit iffy conditions. And it was kind of like that throughout, but yeah, tremendous race.
Because it went Moto E, then Moto 3, Moto 2, yep, MotoGP. So there was even it was a little wet in turn 1 in MotoGP. So it got drier because Moto E was wet and then all that kind of stuff. So it was Romano Fenati. All right, hold on, Jason. All right, who wins the race? Arbolino in second, McPhee in third, Vietti in fourth, Marcos Ramirez in fifth place, Lorenzo Dalla Porta in sixth, Yurchenko in seventh, Kornfeld in eighth, Antonelli ninth, Canet in 10th place, Arenas in 11th, Iogura in 12th, Sasaki in 13th, Foggia in 14th, and Darren Binder in 15th spot, which is the last of our points-paying positions. Mm-hmm. Couple of notables that exited the race. There were only 4 riders, Jason, that weren't classified, which is, pretty rare, I guess, for Moto3 these days. Jama Masia, oh my God, out. Jan Anju, out. And then Tatsuki Suzuki again on that 658 Squadra.
Just can't finish. Yeah. Just can't finish. I mean, and when you look at it, when you think about it, Toba's another guy that doesn't normally finish. He finished, but he's out of the points. I mean, you talk about a guy that's up and down. Toba's, yeah, but did you see? One. Yeah, Ken Anshu, he crashed twice in the race.
He did.
He crashed twice. He crashed twice within 2 laps. So he crashed, picked it up, got going again, crashed in another corner. So, yeah, I mean, conditions were hard, obviously.
By the way, margin of victory, Jason, 1.0 seconds. So in the Moto3 class, that's the largest margin of victory so far this season.
Oh, my God.
We've had one other race that's been 0.9 of a second. All the rest of them have been either point something, like 0.1 or 0.0 something. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Like,
so Fenati,
when you look at after seeing what he did last year, Moto2 in Misano, and like this year, if you've really paid any attention to him, like I have, especially, I've just been really watching how he handles himself. He's been a guy that's been at the front of a lot of these races and then falls back at the end, or he gets mid-pack, or whatever the case is. I thought it was. I thought it was great. I did. I was very critical last year. I thought he should be banned. He was banned. I think it was great that he sat out the last part of last year. It gets another chance with Vianney Sniper's team. Is Arbolino finishes second to him in this race. But it's, you saw the guy go through what he went through last year. And the fact that he seems like a different person this year, I thought it was incredible that he won. I was actually very happy for him. I mean, you always kind of, if he's going to be there, you kind of root for the guy to get back to where he was. Obviously, there's a lot of talent there, right?
Mm-hmm. Tremendous amount of talent. So I was happy too. He paid. He got penalized for what he did, which was, for those that don't remember Fenati. So was it early in the season last year, Jay? It
was at Misano. It was
Misano,
about
down the straightaway,
7th, 8th race in.
He whacked whose brake lever was it?
Monzi's
on the straightaway.
Monzi,
which listen, in this day and age, that's a no-no. And Jason and I have talked about it back in the day when Jason and I were racing. Things like that happened. Like, Jason, you and I used to race with no brake or clutch lever protection, and those types of things. And, I think I told you the story one time about the back straightaway when I was in super sport practice down the back straightaway at Road Atlanta, and Steve Crivier hit my kill switch and my helmet went right through my windscreen.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, like not that big of a deal, but
but like I said, if they had just let Monzi or his team or somebody go over and punch Fanati in the face after Mazzano, it probably would have blown over. It probably would have. If it was like an old school thing, the mechanic comes down with a cigarette in his mouth and punches the rider, and then there's a big ruckus, and then from that point, it would have been like, okay, he got his due, he got punched, and it was the end of it. But now it's everything's so scrutinized, and I was devastated. I couldn't believe that. I could never grab somebody's front brake lever.
I couldn't either.
There's a lot of things I've done that I'm not very proud of at doing on-track things. There's some things that I look back on and go, I probably shouldn't have done that. But in the same sense, there's some things I don't regret, even though they were bad. I wasn't stoked with somebody in it, but to grab somebody's brake lever it's pretty bad.
But he's repented for that. He's done his time, and now he's back in it, and he stands on top of the box. And the thing is there's a lot of opportunity for Fanati after that incident and after he got shunned by the paddock for the most part to walk away from racing and say, that's it.
Yeah.
Props to the guy for sticking it out, coming back up front. Post-race, not in Parc Fermé, but post-race, he was asked that question by the woman interviewing him. She said, look, how do you basically, I can't really say the way she said the question, but the idea behind the question was, how do you reconcile and put away the past and stand on top of the podium? And basically what Fanati said, Jason, is that we are all responsible for writing the script of our lives, and I think that that's a great attitude, meaning you don't have to let other people define how your life is going to go. Yes, that happened. Yes, he got his fine. Yes, he did his time. And if people are still talking smack about him, he doesn't care. He's just going to do what he wants to do passionately. And obviously it showed in the way he raced and the way that race played itself out. Luckily for him, in a way, there was no real challenge at the end because Arbolino and McPhee and Vietti ended up having a little bit of a boxing match themselves, and that created that 1 second gap. So Fanati,
but he rode so good at the front. You're exactly right. And those three guys tying themselves up. But I'm pretty impressed with John McPhee. He's another guy that the commentators are always talking about him and this and that. But he's done a pretty good job as well this year. But he's a little bit hit or miss. Like he kind of he's there or he's crashing. You don't ever really see him finishing 15th or something. And he's been around in Moto3 now. He's made a career out of Moto3. He's been there forever. But pretty impressed by him on the weekend. Let's not forget too, Greg, that we got a pretty gnarly championship battle in that class. And with Dalla Porta getting ahead of Canet, and Canet this weekend was just not really anywhere to be found. And when you look at the results, Greg, you got Honda's occupying 5 out of the top 6 spots. And that's all within 7.5 seconds of each other. The only KTM that was any good really was the Sky Racing VR46 of Celestini Vietti. He ended up 4th, but then you had this whole bunch of KTMs from Yurchenko, Kornfeld, Canet, and Arenas. They're all 17 seconds back. 4 KTMs finished between 7th and 11th. So it just didn't look like Aaron Canet really had the bike underneath him this weekend. So it's going to drop him back in the point standings to 1 point now behind Dalla Porta, who obviously finished further up the field than he did. But Canet, again, doesn't throw the bike down the road trying to win a race. He kind of takes what he gets there. Finishes, what was it, Greg? 12th? 10th. Yeah, he finishes 10th, yeah. So he finishes 10th in that race. And, that's another race that I remember with Argentina. I think he finished 12th. He was back there after being on the front row. You
got to take what you get sometimes. That's,
Agreed.
Well, the worst part about this class,
the
worst part about this class is that situation, where if your bike is off just a smidge and you can't run with that lead group, although this was the smallest lead group that we have seen, I think, all year, but
right.
It's like you're just a little bit farther off and there you are 18 seconds behind the leader,
I think that the reason it was like that, though, don't you, Greg, is because it was kind of half wet, half dry. You weren't able to make some of those passes that maybe we had seen be made in the past, only because it just the conditions maybe weren't exactly there.
No, you're right, 100% right. And even McPhee talked about it when he got in that scrap with Arbolino on that last lap. It was because he made a mistake and went out into the wet stuff, and he just couldn't be aggressive. Think about a Moto3 bike, Jason, from the standpoint of how much like swoopy corner stuff. Like they need all the racetrack to keep the momentum. Now what you've done is basically have the racetrack, or even less than that, giving them a third of the racetrack in some places because of the dry line. So that's totally going to limit the available space that, when they're going 7 wide and they need all that racetrack. So right. I would agree with you. Now that you bring it up, that's really the big defining factor. As you have only 4 riders finishing 1.1, then you have another couple guys, Ramirez, De La Porta, that are 7 seconds back. Then you have another whole group. So you had chunks of riders in this race that were racing each other up, but it was separated by who was willing to take the risk. And if Aaron Canet wins this championship, then this might be one of those races he's going to reflect back on in the team and say, all right, great, man, listen, at least you got the 5 points and you didn't toss her down the road, or 6 points.
Yeah, no, 100% right. And I think that's going to be, that's going to be the difference. And I'm looking forward to watching all the rest of these, because I think it's going to come down to, I think now Fanati's got a little confidence that he's won. That's going to help him as well. So that's going to be great. All right, Greg. So what about Moto E? Moto E this weekend was run in the rain. And I don't know. Like I said, at the beginning of this whole thing, I really wasn't that crazy about it, but at the amount of riders and things that they got involved from the different categories and different places around the world. But Mike DeMeglio wins, and I think, Greg, they said it was his first win since like 2008, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Like
something like that.
Crazy. Xavier Simeon, who we've seen even as recently ride MotoGP last year, he ends up second. Our good friend Bradley Smith ends up third. DeAngelis fourth, and Matteo Ferrari ends up fifth. Then we had Sete Gibernau, which is a kind of a cool story. He was 6.8 seconds back of the winner. Josh Hook, who's a world endurance champion, he ends up seventh. Nico Canepa, eighth. Jesko Raffin, Lorenzo Savadori, who rode World Superbike last year, ends up 10th. Then we had Kenny Ferre, Depunier, Matteo Casati, Nico Terrell, and Nico Tulli ends up finishing 15th in final points. Hector Garzo was our only actual non-finisher of the race. Did you watch it? Did you watch the whole 5 laps that it was?
Oh, 5 laps. Yeah.
All 5 laps?
It was interesting because I think there were a lot of people that were in that Moto E area that were kind of like, oh, is this thing going to make it in the rain? And
I mean, at that track too. At that track, Greg, I know you've never been to this track. I am so lucky that I got to race this place as well. It's as spectacular as you see it on TV. It's a track that doesn't get spoke about, but you want to talk about elevation. That run up to turn 1 and then the right-hander that is turn 1 and then up that hill is so incredibly steep, you have no idea. And I'm thinking it's just going to zap the power out of these bikes. But you got to remember, what goes up must come down as well. So I don't know how much energy they used, obviously coming back down the hill as opposed to going up it. But DeMeglio ends up winning by 2.2 over Simeon and Smith. And Bradley, if you watched him at the beginning, kind of got shuffled backwards and then made his way back to that podium finish. But I thought it was a fun race.
Yeah, it was a fun race. And for Bradley, he's only a couple points out of the lead. I think it's 5 points or something like that out of the championship lead.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, but no, you're right. When it comes to Moto e-bikes, that run, Bradley had talked about this on the podcast earlier in the year about what racetracks are going to, the balance of how much power it takes. But the thing to keep in mind about an electric bike is that you have instant torque on an electric motor, right? And so it's all about electronics and controlling the way it works. So I'm not quite sure how much wet time that the engineers have had to map those bikes. And it looked awfully slippery, but it looked slippery more on the front end of the bike. But it was,
yeah.
But that could be the way that the engine braking works. There's a lot of things. And post-race, Bradley Smith, I think, put it the best, where he was just like, look, okay, good race. Everybody, for the most part, finished. It was slippery. People were kind of all over the place. But now it's time to go back and look at data. So I think that's a great opportunity, even though it's only 5 laps, to take a look at that and say, okay, where is it that we've done well with the maps, which are, it's really everything on those bikes. I mean, the chassis is important, obviously, but, they're heavy bikes, and the amount of torque that's available on them and how much do you give them and all that kind of stuff. So, and I have to be honest, dude, I go back and I listen again and again and again to like the race start and a couple of the bikes, like speed shots where the bikes go by. And I just love the sound of those electric bikes. for what they
Interesting.
are.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow.
I agree.
I mean,
they don't really have
it's a different sound.
They don't have my full attention, but I just think, I don't know. I'm just I love racing. So I'll go to the local fairgrounds. If there's a race going on, I go watch the sprint cars sometimes or whatever. It's been a while, but if there's racing, I like it. And I think that you're right. That I'll tell you one thing, Greg, you better be a strong guy. Because did you notice how many people actually picked their bikes up and kept going when they fell?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
They're impossible to pick up because they're so heavy. So I was watching them try to pick bikes up, and I was, in a way, I was giggling because I'm like, well, the bikes are wet. They're leaned over in the gravel. They weigh 500 pounds, and so they're a bit hard to pick up. So they're just not going to be able to pick them up and keep going, But yeah, I thought it was a good race. I thought it was fun to watch. I don't even know when their next one is. I'd have to look and see. But,
it's a double round at Misano. Is that coming up?
Nope. They were already.
Misano.
You're probably right. You're probably right. It is probably Misano. Yeah, because World Superbike was at Misano, but MotoGP hasn't been there yet. But yeah, you're probably right.
Mm-hmm.
So they go Silverstone,
double round for them, and then Valencia. So yeah, I think there's only a couple races left for them. But again, I like to keep an eye on it, and of course, podcast. Our friend Bradley Smith in that, and the way Bradley's championship, he hasn't won a race yet, but the way his championship is kind of playing out, it's almost like, all right, people go ahead of him, then they fall back, and so maybe the key to the Moto E championship this year is going to be consistency,
Yep, I agree. It's like, and honestly, we haven't seen very many of those bikes like break down. I mean, but then again, they only got to go 5 laps, and at least this one didn't get red flagged and end up a lap short. I think they had a 7-lapper in at Sachsenring, and it got red flagged. So,
they did have
these
another
guys
fire though. Did you hear about that?
I did. I heard they got it out pretty quickly though. I saw somebody's comments about, what they learned about the fire in Jerez, that awful fire they had where it took out all the bikes. They were able to get it under control. So yeah, it's scary stuff but
all right, Jason, do you want to move to some news? Because there has been, you kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast that there was a lot of movement after the break, a lot of crazy things going on. So a lot of things to talk about. We'll just jump right in and say, I think part of the biggest news from a lot of different aspects is that Johan Zarco, who rides for the factory KTM team, is gone. He pulled the plug on 2020.
Yeah.
So that's one news item. Let's talk about that one first, Jason. So here you have a situation where you have a passionate Frenchman who wants to win races. He's got a factory contract extending to 2020. I didn't hear anything coming out of KTM that they didn't want him to ride, and he makes the announcement saying, it's just not working. I'm pulling out. What do you think?
I don't know if it's a shock, is it? I mean, I don't really... Greg, I think if I was in a position like that where... I have been in that position before where I had a really, really bad year, and I ended up re-signing again. And man, it's probably the only time in my life that I can honestly say I had regrets, because you kind of get to the spot where he wanted to be. He's got a factory contract. And I just keep going back. And I know, I don't see if you remember this. I know you will. I remember watching his first laps on that KTM, his very, very first laps at Valencia. It was live. They were broadcasting it. And on the 3rd lap, he went into a left-hander at Valencia. No, he lost the front. He just lost the front. He didn't crash. He just lost the front. And it came to such a shock to him. It was almost like, whoa, like what just happened there? The bike I've been on for the last couple of years, I'm not even pushing yet, and I'm already losing the front. And it was a mixed condition. But literally, as a rider from that point on, you got something that kind of sticks in your brain of like, I didn't even do anything. And then he subsequently crashed a couple more times at the test on the front end. He's got no confidence in the bike. And I tell you, Greg, looking back, I would have much rather had done something else and not got paid and be less miserable than I was doing, going on and doing something again for a second year. I can't imagine the scrutiny that the riders of MotoGP in today's world get put under. And it doesn't surprise me that he's walking away. Where he will end up is going to be the big question mark. But I think that when you look at it, I'm not that surprised. Are you?
No, I guess I'm not that surprised, only because I understand how much talent he has.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot behind the scenes, Jason. A lot of people don't understand that Repsol Honda was talking with him before this KTM deal, and he had this manager he hired, and the manager had already signed a contract for him for the KTM deal, and then was continuing to negotiate with Repsol Honda, knowing that he already had a KTM deal. And Johan ended up firing that guy, as the story goes.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, But the problem is, and I get the whole passion thing versus money, because that's really the shock of it all, is people going like, wait a second, it's kind of like the Howard Sterns of the world. Like Howard Stern, if you ever listen to his program, Jay, he's all about the money. Like, why would you not do this because of the money, the money, the money, money? And it's like, because some people just don't want to live in misery for money.
Correct.
They're more about that passion. And Johan Zarco seems to be that kind of guy that has it within his wits to say, you know what, forget the money.
Yep.
I'm not going to be successful on this bike. There has been talk that the KTM requires an animal to ride the bike. Pole Espargaro. You got to throw the thing around. You got to be aggressive with it. You got to really manhandle the bike. And Johan Zarco is known as a smooth,
Correct.
riding style type thing, and he can't completely change your personality. So I get it. Does it come as a surprise? It comes as a surprise because we don't see riders walking away from rides very often. We have, right? Who walked away from the Tech 3 ride? Jonas Folger is a good example. Wasn't it?
Yeah, he did.
Jonas Folger, the one who
he walked away for they kind of blamed that on a medical reason, I believe. And, right after he had got to the point where I remember him battling, if you remember, he battled Marquez at his home Grand Prix at Sachsenring, and then that was it. Done. He was like pretty much, if the next couple of races, he basically ghosted everything that was going on, and then he was gone. So I just don't think that we've seen a rider walk away because he just can't get along with a motorcycle. Like he's just not, not happy on the bike. It's like, he just doesn't want to ride it. I mean, look, I guess you could say that Rossi walked away after 2 years. He wasn't going to get re-signed at Ducati, but at the end of the day, I can't remember a rider walking away in the middle of his contract and going, hey, you guys. And from what I read, which is probably the same thing you read, it was a fairly emotional, hard thing for him to, talk to Pit Buyer and the management at KTM about him moving away. And I you know what, in a way, Greg, I kind of commend him, because there's no sense in being miserable. You're taking a lot of risks at this sport. I always tell people that you're trying just as hard when you're finishing 10th as you are to win a race. Like there's not a magic button where a rider just automatically tries harder when they're winning. These guys are trying hard all the time. And when you're putting yourself at that much risk all the time and you don't feel comfortable, that 18 races, that's a long, long year of being miserable.
Yeah.
So good for him.
And I would also say, Jay, that sometimes and you would know this better than I would, sometimes winning comes easier than 10th place comes in terms of the amount of effort that you put out. So I think it's, and it also, though, what's interesting is it comes off of the back of KTM signing a 5-year deal with Dorna to stay in MotoGP. So one of the things that's interesting about why KTM decided to sign that extension with Dorna and basically commit to, yes, we're going to be here. Yes, we're going to have KTM factory, our MotoGP machines, is because KTM said, look, that's going to be year 7 and year 8 for us, because this is the 3rd year. So you get a 5-year deal. Now you're in 7 and 8. At least that's just a commitment now. I mean, obviously they'll probably look, to commit more, but it took them 7 years to win the Dakar rally when KTM made the commitment.
Yeah. And
so they're kind of using that as a benchmark. And so for a guy like Johan Zarco, he's going to know that was coming.
Yep.
So I'm sure KTM said, look, man, you're in our plans, but if the direction of the development of the bike was going in a certain way, going the Pole Espargaro way, the more aggressive riding style and all that kind of stuff. And he said, look, no matter what I do, maybe he wasn't getting what he felt like he needed and those types of things. And we know from Josh Herron being inside with Johan Zarco that Zarco and his camp can be very demanding. Like they're very laser focused. They understand what they want. They understand that, that he is passionate about the sport. So, yeah, I agree with you. I just commend him for what he's doing. So the next topic, obviously, is going to be that signing of KTM for 5 years, Jason, with Dorna in MotoGP, because you mentioned it earlier. KTM is going to be pulling out of the Moto2 chassis game, and they're going to be refocusing more resources into MotoGP. Additionally, you have KTM in Moto3. What the company in general is going to do is the KTM name in Moto3 is going to be going away, and it's actually going to become the Husqvarna brand, which, of course, KTM owns Husqvarna.
Correct.
And it was said in an interview that they're going to come out with a brand new Moto3 bike. They're going to go in a little bit different direction. So now what you're going to see is more commitment. So KTM's not it's not a Honda. You know what I mean? It's not. It's a small Austrian company. So you're going to see resources now that are being utilized. I was going to say squandered, but utilized in Moto 2. Now that's going to move to the MotoGP bike. And that could accelerate, their ability to get up front. The one thing everybody says about the KTM is strong motor. Strong motor, like competitive
fast.
motor.
It looks fast.
Yeah, real fast. Exactly. So, yeah. What
Greg,
do you think about?
Yeah, I think it's great that they've recommitted to it. It's great for MotoGP that they've got that manufacturer sticking around, committed for another 5 years. It'll be interesting to see, what person they end up putting on that bike. Big name guy. I think Paul Espargaro has just done such a tremendous job this year. He has kind of been, I think, one of my bright spots of 2019 when I look back on it. He has limited his crashes in races. When he's finished, he's been impressive. He's the only guy that's really been able to handle that bike. It's great to see only 16 seconds back this weekend, Miguel Oliveira. But I think the KTM's future is going to be good. And it's going to be great. And it'll be interesting to see who gets put on that bike. Greg, there was some scuttle before the weekend, and I think this is almost bigger news in my own feel. And I try to put myself in the position of understanding what's going on over there. But when you see today, we know now that Jack Miller has been re-signed with Pramac Ducati, and you see the anguish that he went through because he hadn't been signed yet. Bagnaia is already there as his teammate on a 2-year deal. They've got Dovi and Petrucci have already signed on the factory team. But then you get the murmurs of Jorge Lorenzo, and this could just be complete speculation. His manager was seen talking to some Ducati people around earlier in Brno, and so obviously it spread like wildfire that Lorenzo wants to come back to Ducati. Now, let me ask you a question, Greg, and this is great because you and I haven't even talked about this. But when you look at this weekend at the A1 ring and we go to a track that Ducati is supposed to dominate at the beginning of the year, who did I say I probably would have picked to win the championship had he stayed where he was?
Oh, Lorenzo, 100% Lorenzo on the Ducati, yeah. Yes. And I agreed with you 100%. Yep. 100%.
Had he stayed there, I think he would have been the guy that could have competed with Marquez all year long. He seemed like he was getting on with the bike better. He was winning at multiple different racetracks. He won 3 rounds in a row, and they were a little bit different. Obviously, Mugello's fast, and the A1 ring is fast. But the thing is that he was showing that he can take it to Marquez. Now, up until this race, I hadn't seen anybody take it to Marquez in a way that it was done this weekend as Dovi did it. Last year, Lorenzo did it to Marquez the exact same way that Dovi did it this year, battling with him at this particular race. I wonder, I think it's a perfect case scenario for Dovi, number one, and for Jack Miller. Miller, to me, I think is incredible. I love him. He's a good guy. He just crashes too much. Like, his riding to me is he's riding so hard to try to stay. He never looks controlled or really comfortable being there. I think he's more than capable of winning races if he just can sort out some of the tip-offs. Dovi, it seems like some weekends he's there, some weekends he's not. I think if Lorenzo stayed on that bike all year, he would have been the guy to really take it to the championship. But I think with Dovi winning, what do you think? You think that any of this could have changed a little bit more had Dovi not won on the weekend? Like, let's say Dovi gets beat and finishes second to Marquez again in the same fashion that he won. Do you think any of this goes another direction, possibly?
I don't know. You mean that rumor that all started Thursday? If it go, you know what I mean? Like, because it was kind of squelched by the time the race. The biggest concern I think that I have, and it kind of sounded like Ducati has it as well, is who's developing that bike.
Exactly.
Lorenzo's presence there really helped to advance the Ducati.
Yes.
And now, as we talked about on the podcast before, the trinkets, all the electronic things and the aero and all that kind of stuff have kind of played itself out, and other teams are catching them. I don't know if you know, but Aprilia instituted a launch control system as well, like 2 races ago, and Aleix Espargaro got the best start he got a couple races ago. Where he went like 18th, went to 11th, and so now teams are starting to research what Ducati's already doing. But so now it comes back down to the foundation of the bike. So for me, it would make sense that Ducati would try to go talk to Lorenzo and say, hey, you interested in coming back? But, listen, when you have Marc Marquez leading the championship and checking out of races, the press has got to talk about something. I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to sell newspapers, you're trying to get web clicks. And so it didn't surprise me when I turned the computer on Thursday or Friday or whatever, and I saw, oh my goodness, Lorenzo, blah, 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 Repsol Honda. They haven't even talked to Lorenzo in weeks. And you know what I mean? And then the next wave was, Alberto Puig comes out and says, oh, I've talked to Lorenzo and everything's fine. And he's making a commitment to stay. And then all of a sudden it was like the domino effect. And, now all of a sudden the contract's going to be for Miller. He's made, and it just seemed like a bunch of smoke and mirrors that are trying to cover the fact that MotoGP is a little on the boring side because Marquez is now got a Honda where he can whip some booty.
But I look at Zarco and I think he wants to walk away from his deal because he doesn't feel like he can compete on it. And I got to say that I think Lorenzo is way worse on this Honda than he was when he started on the Ducati. And it was pretty morbid on the Ducati. But the Honda, this guy could barely crack the top 15 on a good day. So when you look at it now, he's injured and he's going to be coming back. I believe there was probably a little bit more to it. And I could be I could be way off. But I believe there's more to it than that. Possibly, only because I don't think his relationship with Ducati was necessarily ended in a bad way. I think if you remember how it all went down in Mugello, basically Ducati had put something on the table that kind of said, here's what we can do. But Honda came in with a number that sounded like it was, they basically said, you got to make the decision today. He made the decision that weekend, then goes out and wins on the Ducati and then puts 2 more wins together on the Ducati. I don't think that Ducati could definitely not hate him for that. And when you look at it, that I don't think it was ended in a bad way. I think that the guy I feel most bad about is Miller because for whatever reason that he hadn't got re-signed yet, and I do believe he deserves to get re-signed, by the way. I feel that man, it would have been pretty gnarly had they hey, we're going to take Lorenzo back. Where would Miller have gone? I know he could have probably gone to KTM. The Honda seat would have been open. And see, when it all started to play out for me and we heard that Marquez Jr., Alex Marquez, was going to Petronas, that got squashed because of Yamaha doesn't want him. Lynn Jarvis came out in the press and said, listen, we can't have Alex Marquez come here when his brother's been riding for Honda and all that. I started thinking to myself, I could see a scenario where Lorenzo goes to Ducati, Miller goes to KTM, and Alex Marquez gets brought up and goes to Honda with his brother. It was like there was this crazy little scenario in my head,
storm, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, I agree. And the tie though, Jason, at Ducati is Gigi Dall'Igna. He's worked with Lorenzo all those years and everything else. And the one thing I'd never heard about, and maybe it was brought out in the press and I just missed it, was Gigi Dall'Igna's reaction to Lorenzo signing with Honda kind of mid-season. Because I thought that those two were getting together. They were starting to make advancements with the bike and do all those types of things. So, listen, I mean, this is the way it works. I mean, why wouldn't you go, you know what? We've made the biggest strides with Lorenzo on this Ducati. Yeah. Can we get him back? Can we just ask, what's the deal? How much is the contract to buy out?
Yeah. And I got to think that even on Ducati's end of it, it was just like, it was like a perfect storm scenario at Mugello. It was like they're in Italy. They not really sure if they want Lorenzo back. Honda kind of says, you've got to sign this by right now or else it's going to go away. And Lorenzo wasn't sure if Ducati even wanted him. So he signs with Honda. I mean, what could go wrong with that? I mean, getting on a bike that's been the world champion's bike. And I mean, I don't know. It all seemed like it was just, there didn't really ever seem like there was animosities. And like you say, the relationship between Lorenzo and Gigi seems like it's pretty strong. And I think Miller would have been the bad man out here. And I felt bad for the guy because it's got to, and he's out there trying his best this weekend to do the best he can. I think that Jack can win races. I want to see, I think it goes back to some of that franticness that we talk about with some of the other riders. He's trying so hard that it would just be good to be able to see him hang in there to the end. He said in his crash, he's like, I broke 2 meters later than I did any other lap. And that's why I fell. It's like, man, those little things are what you got to stop doing. A podium this weekend could have gone such a long way. And who's to say he couldn't have, maybe gone with those guys a little bit more, but for sure, Quartararo was going to get ticked off, I think, by Miller. He would have been, I think he would have been on the podium. He never really got there. So anyways, I just think that really interesting news. Where's Zarco going to end up, Greg?
Well, and that's really the talking point. Once you're out of MotoGP, it's really hard to get back in. Really hard. People have, but now the depth of field is so incredible that it's like, that's what people are talking about. It's like, if you leave, Jonas Folger, and you want to come back, Jonas Folger, where are you going to find a place to go? So I don't know if maybe Zarco knows something, but he had kind of hinted in the press like, hey, I'm just walking away, and the next step will decide itself. So, I mean, obviously people would want him back in Moto 2. There's no doubt.
Well, you got to think he's got to go to either, since Marquez didn't go to Petronas Moto 2 team, they were going to sign him. Doesn't it just make sense that maybe Zarco goes back to the Petronas team on a Moto 2 bike with hopefully the option of maybe jumping up to, because like you got to think next year all these contracts are up. I could see Quartararo going to the factory Yamaha for either one of the two riders that they have now, and then maybe Zarco bumps up. I mean, can you see that scenario play itself out? I certainly can myself.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, because there's a direct tie in there. Speaking of that, though, Jason, Bradley Smith's going to be racing Moto 2 for the Petronas Sprinta team at Silverstone. It's the first time that he's been on a Moto 2 bike since 2012. It's obviously a different animal, more suited to someone who understands electronics with a little bit more horsepower. But Dunlops, it's been a long time since he's been on Dunlops. What do you think? What do you think that Bradley Smith's going to do on the Moto 2 bike?
I think Bradley Smith's enjoying riding a lot of different bikes this year. I think he's staying busy, obviously, with the Moto E commitments, the testing for Aprilia, the wild cards with Aprilia. Now he throws a Moto 2 ride in there. I think it's great. I think it's great that Bradley wants to stay active. He wants to stay on a bike. I think when the KTM thing was going away, there was talk of him, kind of saying, I might step away from racing. And maybe he's found that hunger again, and he seems to be enjoying himself. Yeah, do I have any real opinion on it? I don't. I hope he does great. I just think that Moto 2, Moto 3, MotoGP, any of those series are just hard to just jump in and out of. Hey, I'm going to go do a wild card. It's just hard. I hope he enjoys himself. I can imagine the expectations that he's putting on himself. Hopefully they stay realistic.
It makes a lot of sense because it's the same team. It's the same team he races for in Moto E. You know what I mean? That Johan Stiggerfeld deal. So that part of it kind of makes sense. It's not like he's got no tie to these people, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, any Moto 2 bike. So, why not look across and say, hey, Bradley, you want to give this a go? Our rider's injured, and exactly. Yeah, all right, I'll go.
It's his home Grand Prix. He knows the track. Obviously,
grew up 30
all that
minutes.
Stuff,
he grew up 30 minutes from Silverstone,
Correct.
So he's been there quite a bit. All right, so what about your boy, American Brandon Paasch? He's going to get a wild card at Silverstone. So obviously racing BSB, British Superbike Series, Moto 3. He's leading the championship. Is that right? Or
I believe he is. Yes.
Yeah. So
I know the top two guys, I believe, get the option of being able to go. That's what I've been hearing. And I love Brandon Paasch. I think he's a kid that he's you hate saying out of sight, out of mind, but he's not over here, and he's taken another path because he had to. He's the kind of guy that's like, has leathers, will travel. I'll figure it out. He's a teenage kid that just busts his ass. That's what he does. And it's, I believe that he could be a force to be reckoned with in any series that he runs. I think that if he ran 600 Super Sport over here, heck, I think if you put the kid on a good super bike and you gave him the right amount of testing, his commitment level seems to be there. I think it's going to be as he probably expects as well. I think it's going to be an eye opener for him to go and run against those guys in Moto 3. He's big, which I don't like. I wish he was smaller.
Tall. He's super skinny, but he is tall.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Tall, yeah. I wish that there was a way that, obviously you can't change that, but I wish there was a way that you could, because he's just,
you're working on it, aren't you?
Up a little bit.
Aren't you? You're working on getting shorter, aren't you, buddy?
Yeah, right. No kidding. I wish. I'm just worried. I'm just working on walking, Greg. That's all I'm working on now. I'm going. It's been so rough, but yeah. Good luck to Brandon Paasch. Obviously, I'm gonna really be pulling for him. Or as a lot of us are, Greg. I think it's great. So you and I this weekend, we were up at Sonoma for MotoAmerica, and we had a 2-day weekend. And I know we're going to do our special MotoAmerica podcast on Monday, where we're going to cover each one of these classes in depth. When you look back, Greg, I think that when we talk about Superbike, we had 2 Yamahas winning this weekend. Garrett Gerloff goes on and wins another race, which I thought was spectacular for him. There was obviously some things that went on behind that, as well as looking at race 2 and Cameron Beaubier winning. I think the thing I'm going to take away the most from, and we'll get into a much more detail about this when we do our rundown on the MotoAmerica podcast, but Tony Elias making another big mistake, I think, is the one thing that kind of sticks in my brain a little bit.
Yeah, so he comes into the weekend with a 39-point advantage. Does Tony Elias over Cameron Beaubier. Beaubier ends up exiting race number 1. Tony Elias gets 20 points on Beaubier in the championship with Gerloff's win, and then the next day turns around and crashes himself out with Cameron winning. That means that there was a 5-point shift to Cameron Beaubier's favor. I was really surprised to see Tony hit the deck, because I think you said it in the broadcast even, Jay, or maybe after the broadcast, that you don't see Tony exiting a race like that early in the race. It's usually not his deal. So I was surprised. I think Saturday's race was definitely strange. There was a lot of attrition in that race. There were a lot of people having problems. There was the largest gap that we have seen in quite some time, 10.3 seconds, the margin of victory for Gerloff.
Yeah.
And that was even padded by the fact that Garrett kind of coasted out of the final corner. I mean, it was larger than that, Jay. But the thing, and we'll get more into this, but I just think the thing to think about as we talk about our Monday podcast is the track conditions at Sonoma Raceway are just absolute junk. And I think when you have an accelerated program where you have only these 2 days, that it gives an opportunity for people to separate themselves, because if you're going to hit on that setup early, or you need more time, like Tony Elias did and his team and Matthew Skoltz did, that's what's creating part of this separation. It's not the actual track conditions themselves. It's more with the way the bumps are and everything else now, and the available traction, that some of these teams just needed more time. They needed more sessions to get it figured out, or an entire race to get it figured out. And I also think that because of Josh Herron not finishing and Cameron Beaubier not finishing, and, the Kyle Wymans, the Cameron Petersons, the Jake Lewises, that kind of affected the way things ended up on Sunday. But
yeah, I agree. I agree. I just think that when you look back, I think that we hold guys like Cameron and Tony, Garrett. I look, me, myself, I hold these guys in such high regard that there's times when I simply, I go, wow, that just happened. Now, what was weird, Greg, and I don't know if you care to comment on this, but I wasn't as surprised with Cameron's accident as I was with Tony's. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, because Cameron's accident, he knew he had to win. He had to get by Tony. He had to take off on new tires with a full tank of fuel. Tony got the perfect start the first day. And I just feel like Cameron making the small mistake that he made didn't shock me as much, because he was making an effort to pass. I think that the fact that Cameron was in front of Tony on the second day, and Tony could literally go, okay, I know he doesn't want to give up 5 points, but man, walking out of there with a 60-plus point lead would have been nice. I was a little bit more shocked at Tony's incident than I was Cameron's. So
I get it.
Yeah, that's what surprised me.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from.
So,
and now the point spread is 34 points. So it's we still have
doable.
What, Jay? Yeah, it's doable with eight. So we have 150 points.
Six races left.
150 points left with 34. The difference.
And Garrett's right back in it now too. So you got two Yamaha guys. Yeah. So is he 40? Is he 40 behind Tony? Is that what it is, Greg?
Yes, sir. 40 points.
Is that right?
Yep.
So all of a sudden it's and we saw how upset Tony was after Road America. This one was really funny because I made a comment on the telecast that he could have chose to walk to the outside of where he fell and kind of probably been picked up and brought back to the pits. He ran to the inside of the track and then walked the length of the drag strip. It looked like all the way, just having a talk with himself probably while watching those two Yamahas end up first and second. But yes,
no
interesting.
Doubt. All right, moving on to Supersport, Jason, because it was Hayden Gillum who won race number 1 by 1/10 of a second over Bobby Fong, and that was a really good race. PJ Jacobson finishing 3 seconds behind in a very long face. Bryce Prince, Josh Hayes, your top 5. In race number 2, it was PJ who won by 8 seconds over Fong, Bryce Prince third, and Hayden Gillum in this one. In terms of the championship itself, Bobby Fong's leading Hayden Gillum now by 20, so he got a couple of points on that one. Jason, what was impressive to me was Hayden Gillum not being very comfortable on his ridiculous racing Yamaha and still pulling off the race 1 win. And then obviously the changes that the Celtic HSBK Racing team made for PJ after day 1 going into day 2, and how PJ ended up dominating the second half of that race. What about you?
8 seconds. I mean, you're 100% right. But I think the bigger question is if you would have come into that race weekend and you had money to put down on somebody, would you have bet that if Hayden Gillum finished both races that he wouldn't be on the podium in one of them?
No, I wouldn't. No,
I would have said not. Hayden Gillum's on the podium in both. There's just seems to be this year I think that the level has jumped up quite a bit, and you saw a huge, a big improvement overnight on that Celtic HSBK racing team, like you said, with PJ Jacobsen on it. Scotty Jensen and his team of guys went to work on that bike, and they gave PJ a bike that obviously worked much better for him. And again, I think that we've just seen this resurgence from Bobby Fong, where he showed that he could lead races. He did lead races. He ends up second the first day. The next day, he beats the main guy that he had to beat. And you can, send Bryce Prince a Christmas card too for getting in between him and Hayden Gillum. And Bryce Prince ends up third, 10.9 back. And when you look at it, I think Bobby Fong he's shown this maturity of, okay, look, I want to win every race, and I'm going to show that I can lead. I'm going to show that I can win these races. But right now, it's really between him and one other guy. And what does he got, Greg? How big of a lead has he got over Hayden now? You said 20 points.
Bobby's got 20, but PJ's only 16 back from Hayden Gillum. So 36 points. So you're looking at like the difference in Superbike between first and second, where PJ's sitting. And you know what I mean?
Six races to go again. Mm-hmm. 6 races to go again. And I feel that, Greg, anything can happen in those 6 races. And we've seen, I tell you, the other one, I was really bummed to see Richie Escalante tip off. I thought that we were going to see him on the podium and continue his brilliant run this year. He's had a great run. He ended up 7th the first day. He got himself up to 3rd. He tipped off. And I think that there's a couple other guys that we'll talk about on Monday that I was really impressed with. There's some guys that are finishing in the top 10 that I was really, it was really nice to see. I think that championship is strong. I think
we'll definitely talk about we'll talk about Sean Dillon Kelly and his comeback and crash, and there's a bunch of stuff to talk about in Super Sport. We'll cover all that stuff. Yep. Let's
talk about Junior Cup because I mean, I don't know, it sounds so redundant, but I mean, when you look at what Junior Cup is and you see what's going on, race 1 obviously was actually an interesting race because Rocco only won by 1.5 seconds, but he kind of got the lead. I think everybody thought he would just kind of check out. Rocco ends up winning 1.5 seconds over Almeida and Mark Edwards, which I thought was a great race. And then the second day, I went out and watched warm up, and Rocco just looked like on rails. I think he was almost a second plus quicker in morning warm up. And again, Kevin Almeida brings it to him. They end up just checking out, Greg. They were doing minute 46s around Sonoma, which I'm telling you is, I'll put it to you this way. There were some people that qualified on thousands for the 1,000 Superstock race that went slower than that pace of these 2 kids on the Liqui class. Okay. And, but they ended up just smoking everybody the second day, almost 20 seconds over Edwards. But again, Rocco comes out on top. I think the things that we'll talk about are the fact that Dallas Daniels is no longer in the championship with the current team that he was on. There will be some news that we'll be able to share on that on Monday as well, I believe. I got some information of some things that are going on there. So, but Rocco, now that the championship is just so blown out of proportion, he could literally, I think he could sit out the next race for sure. He could just sit out and do nothing.
He could sit out 3 races. He's got a 76-point lead in the championship.
Yeah, and it almost seems like it should be bigger than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about disqualifications from Josh Cernay and a couple other riders and how that happened and what our opinion is of that one, because that's Josh Cernay had the fastest lap of the race in race number 1. He gets disqualified in race number 2, and you got to kind of, was the bike illegal all weekend long, and how do they handle that? So, but I mean, the way Rocco Landers is riding and the race in race number 2 from Kevin Almeida, it was a lot of fun to watch both races in Liqui Junior Cup. We're also going to talk about Stock 1000. Yeah, good kid. Stock 1000. Yep. Oh my goodness, this kid named Andrew Lee ended up winning by 7.6 seconds. And in my face, okay, Jason, in my face, because last time we talked about this, Andrew Lee, I said something about Andrew and lacking explosive speed. And I did get a message from Andrew after that race, I think on Monday. And he said, explosive enough for you? And I was like, whoa. And I mean, Andrew, he had a fastest lap of the race.
They're listening to us, Greg. They're listening. That's the main thing.
So Andrew, hey, listen, no question, Andrew needs to get on a superbike. He needs to have someone give him a chance to get on a superbike. I think it's time. He's got the stock 1,000 thing dialed in. I mean, besides, I think he lost one race this year, and that's when his finger was all mangled up. So Andrew Lee over Michael Gilbert, a good run from him. 7.6, Jeff May 11.4 back, and then you had Stefano Mesa, who continues to pile up some points. In his bid.
Good. I thought Stefano did great. Having never seen that place, I believe I didn't actually ask him that, but he'd never seen it. To do that in 2 days and kind of hey, we're going to some tracks now that he's going to be. Oh yeah. He's going to be tough to beat. I mean, that kid's he's probably licking his chops going to Pittsburgh and going to
Jersey, especially, right?
Jersey and Barber. I mean, he's been racing the weirdest stuff. I think when you talk about explosive speed of Andrew, I think he kind of proved that to us. 1.1 seconds he qualified on pole, Greg, from the next guy, which is Jeff May, that's pretty incredible in and of itself that he could be 1.1 seconds. I mean, that's fast. I agree with you. I agree with you on Andrew.
He needs to not listen to me though, Jason, because if he puts it on the deck because he's trying to get explosive speed, I'm going to feel horrible. Horrible.
Yeah, no, I know.
I can't believe anybody listens to what I have to say though. Who cares what I have to say? Whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, but everybody's listening though, right? And it doesn't matter, Greg. We could say 10,000 great things.
Yeah.
But the one, and I know what you meant. There was nothing that you said that was wrong about what you said.
No.
It's an opinion, and we know your opinion doesn't mean squat. So anyways, let's move on. Twins class, Greg. We had a huge shakeup this weekend.
Yeah, we did.
And I was a little bit bummed. I love Michael Barnes. I just think that it is so bitching that he is still racing. And it was unfortunate this weekend. Everybody's going to say, yeah, but Jay, you're with Alex Dumas. Look, I love Alex too, but I have such a deep-hearted respect for Michael Barnes and who he is and how he rides and what he does. And his bike ended up breaking, Greg. But what it did is it really ramped up this championship because Dumas ends up going on and beating Drake Beecham, and Joe Blasius gets his first podium. Those were the top three in the race. Barney breaks. Now we've got a 1-point championship lead. Drake Beecham is 1 point over Alex, and just 1 point behind Alex is Michael Barnes. So we've got three guys within 2 points in our Twins Cup class, which I think is going to make it for a really fun. I think the next round they do, G-Dub, at Pittsburgh is a double round as well.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a double round for Twins Cup at the next round. So, I think it's great. It's the one championship that we've got. I think all of our championships are obviously still very alive, but this is going to be a fun one to watch down to the end because you got this guy, Michael Barnes, who's been around for so long, so much experience, still has that speed, has a great team behind him and a good bike. How are they going to rebound come Pittsburgh? I don't know if Barney's ever – I can't say I can say for sure if Barney's ever ridden there, let alone – I know he's probably never raced there. It ain't going to matter. He's a seasoned vet. He'll figure that place out in one session. So
I think it's bitchin' that you still use the word
I do too.
bitchin'. Okay, that's
I do think it's great. I'm California man all the way. Sorry, it's just all
right. So my heart broke twice in the Twins race. Obviously, when Barney's bike broke, and he was in a commanding lead, wasn't he? When the bike broke,
he was. I wouldn't say it was commanding. He was he had about a 1 second lead, but he had turned the quickest lap of the race, and
all that. Yeah,
it looked like it was going to come down between him and Alex for sure. Barney obviously had the pace. But he ran like a 42. He ran like 42.6, minute 42.6, which is fast up there. Yeah. On what he's riding, yes.
And then Chris Parrish, our number one plate from last year, he crashed and wrecked that beautiful bodywork of his and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of bummed to see Chris hit the deck too. But it turns out that right now, Twins Cup is our championship. It's like our closest 1 point.
It's a great one.
Yeah, it's a great one. So that's MotoAmerica. We'll talk more about that on our Monday when we kind of break it down and break down what we can expect on that one. Jay, just real quick, just wanted to touch on American Flat Track because while we were in Sonoma, just up the road in Sacramento, they had their mile, and it was a makeup race for them. And in the AFT Twins presented by Vance and Hines, it was Jared Mees who got the win by a tenth of a second over Breyer Bauman and Davis Fisher in that championship. Breyer Bauman still leads Jared Mees. It's 218 to 191. So it's right there. They're going to race it all the way down to the end. Also wanted to give a shout out to Shayna Texter, who ended up winning the Roof Systems AFT singles presented by Russ Brown Motorcycle Auto. And in that championship. It's still pretty close, a couple points there. So just wanted to mention that. It was good racing in that series. Also, Jason, wanted to mention congratulations to Ben Young. He won his first Canadian Superbike championship. So
yeah, that's great to see. I mean, it's good to see Ben, thriving in another championship up there, and man, beating Jordan Zoke. That is no small task. Nope. So congrats to Ben Young for sure.
And it was all drama filled, by the way. There was a video that was put out. Yeah, I think by his pops or whatever. The race wasn't drama filled, but basically what happened is in qualifying, he crashed and destroyed the bike. And I'm not 100% sure on the rules for Canadian Superbike, but you have to dyno the bike within a certain time limit. And so they had to throw this bike back together just so it could run. And in the video, you see the official say you have, I think it's 10 seconds or 15 seconds. And they're like, da, 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 and like with literally seconds to go, like it was some Hollywood movie drama thing. They just hit the button and the bike started, boom, and everybody was cheering. So he got to keep his pole position, which of course helped his result and helped him wrap up the championship. So yeah, it was great. The Canadian Superbike, but already I think, that series is basically over. I haven't even checked the calendar, but it's a shame. But Jay, let's move on to the race calendar because Jason and I want you to get out and watch some race. The British Superbike Series is headed to Caldwell Park. So if you're in the UK, why don't you check that out? Here in the States, American Flat Track continues its torrid pace. Peoria, Illinois is the next stop for the famed Peoria TT. They got to jump in everything. Can JD Beach do it again, Jason? That's the question. Also, the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship heads to Budds Creek in Maryland. It's this Saturday. That is always a fun one. Been there a couple times and love that one. World Speedway in Sweden. So for our one listener in Sweden, go check out World Speedway. All right.
Awesome. I love that stuff too. I wish we got more of that over here.
Yeah, me too. Well, Jay, anything else you want to say before we check out of this one?
Nope. Thanks, G-Dub, for everything. Hey, good luck tomorrow. Thank you. Go kill it tomorrow. And I know you got about 3 or 4 hours of putting this thing together, but yeah, good luck tomorrow.
No, it's good. I got my practice in, and I appreciate it. Yeah, we have qualifying rounds in a championship Thursday, Friday, and then you take your Friday score and shoot elimination round Saturday. So we have 2 championships, national championships going on at the same time. So I have 2 opportunities to get on a podium. So who knows? Fingers crossed.
Think Tom Brady. Do it, G-Dub.